Hi everyone, Happy New Year, and thank you for joining today's webinar with Spec Innovations. Today's webinar is titled DoDAF and Innoslate 4.1. My name is Joanna Moore, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. I'd like to go over a few things before we get started. During the presentation, feel free to send us questions using the panel on the right, and we'll get them answered in the Q&A part of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and we will make it available to you after the live presentation on the Spec Innovations YouTube channel. Now I'd like to present to you our speaker, Dr. Stephen Dam. Today he'll be showing you the new features of the recently released DoDAF View in Innoslate 4.1. He will provide an overview of DoDAF and show you how you can use many new capabilities in Innoslate to enhance your integration of DoDAF and model-based systems engineering. Dr. Stephen Dam is the president and founder of Spec Innovations and author of Department of Defense Architecture Framework, a guide to applying system engineering to develop integrated executable architectures. Dr. Stephen Dam also provided leadership in the development of C4ISR and the Department of Defense Architecture Framework. He is a certified expert systems engineering professional and a long-term member of INCOSE, holding various positions such as president of the Wadrow Area Chapter and director for the Americas. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joanna. So today I'm going to take a very brief history lesson and overview of DoDAF for those who may not be totally familiar with it. I won't spend a lot of time on that. So this is not a DoDAF per se presentation. It's really more of our implementation of DoDAF and particularly some tips and tricks in using it. And also converting from 3.9 to 4.1, which is the jump from to DoDAF. We did 4.0. We did not release a DoDAF dashboard for a variety of reasons. And then, of course, next stage is accessing the viewpoints themselves, how you can do that, and specifically some new visualizations of DoDAF-specific models we have now in Innoslate 4.1. So a little history and overview. So if most of you hopefully have seen this chart or are familiar with this chart or this history, this is kind of what kind of led up to the current version of DoDAF to a great extent. Although DoDAF now is in 2.0.2, but it still fundamentally was released in 2009. If we go back in time, when it really started was something called the C4ISR architecture framework, and that was focused in that domain, the command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You can see why we use the acronym. Anyway, so that got kicked off in '96. There was a flurry of comments, and in '97, I got involved with it as the representative to the panel from the Defense Airborne Reconnaissance Office. We were doing a vision architecture for airborne reconnaissance across all of DoD at the time, and they wanted to make sure we were going to be compliant with this new framework. And so, since this was one of the big architectures that people were looking at. And so I got tagged to be the person on the panel. And my only claim to fame on that one is I got us to go from thinking those as operational systems and technical as instead of separate architectures, that they were actually views of an architecture. So that's where the thing, we went from OAs to OVs, and that was not a minor change in the philosophy or in the actual documentation itself. Well, as you see, it kind of muddled along for a while. In 2003, DoDAF itself became available, so they broadened it beyond the C4ISR community to the rest of all of DoD. And there were spin-offs. The MOD is the Ministry of Defense, which is United Kingdom's Defense Department, basically. NAF is the NATO version of that, and there's one up in the corner called DINDAF, and I believe that's particularly the Canadian one. So, and I had some influence in that as well originally. So you know, that whole migration of things to DoDAF 2.0, where we had a major change occur in how we looked at things. By that time, the whole JSIDS process had come into more direct line, there were more capabilities-based things. So some fundamental changes were made. And instead of having just the 3 viewpoints, or 4 actually with the all view, they came up with this chart. And this chart looks at the problem as a capability viewpoint, the operational viewpoint, services viewpoint, and systems viewpoint. And those are a decomposition, in case anybody's wondering. That is what that was designed to be. So the high level capability level requirements basically are shown up at the very top. Then you tie into the operational scenarios and things like that in the operational views. Then you bring in the services if that's appropriate, if the service layer makes sense. If not, ignore that layer, by the way, and then go to systems. And so that gives you that set of things. And then they took things like the all viewpoint, made that a cross-cutting viewpoint. They recognize that data information cuts across all these things as well. And same thing with standards and the project viewpoint. So these were added in, many of these were added in to the set of viewpoints to allow you to have a more complete architecture. That's still not enough. People are looking at other things, and there's a new thing coming out called the Unified Architecture Framework, which I'll talk about briefly more in another second. But let's, before that, just kind of remind you what they are. So they created these different sets of, we used to call them products, and I still do. I probably am wrong in doing that, but that's what it is. They call them models, and what those are different types of diagrams to a great extent, or document types or things like that that are being characterized as being products that you would create to kind of describe your architecture. So there's a lot of overlap between those viewpoints, by the way, and we're going to see that in a second. And a lot of mapping files. I mean, if you look at the CVs, CV 5, 6, and 7 are all mapped to other things, other viewpoints, which is kind of fascinating. So there's a whole aspect of this where they're trying to get that traceability through those mappings. And so that's a key part of this. So you'll see those symbols, and they are referring to the viewpoint and then the specific product or model that are associated with that viewpoint. And so that's kind of how this is grouped. Again, it's a fairly large set. And when I say, if you look at it, the grouping of the models by type, so if you look at the top there, those are the types of diagrams or representations, shall we say, of the information. So for example, it's funny that they put the AV1 as tabular. That's really a Word document usually, the way most people characterize the AV1. It's created that way. AV2, they have as a taxonomy. Well, in a sense, it's more really closer to, at least the way most people use it, is more like a glossary. So again, these are not exact bins for these things, but you can also see where there's a lot of overlap. So if I look at particularly behavioral, you look at all these different things that are in there, the OV6s, the 3 different types of those, the SV 10s, okay, and the service view 10s as you come down, again, ABC. Those are all basically the same type of visualization or documentation. And it's really representative of the fact that you could do these at different levels of decomposition. So the whole idea, and when, again, harkening back to the original C4ISR architecture framework, the whole idea here was to force people to do the kinds of things that you need to do in systems engineering properly, and recognize that these products overlap each other significantly, and they're not independent of one another. But these are just different visualizations of the information to be able to understand and see how you want to operate and develop your system and specify it as completely as possible. So this gives you at least an idea of how you might represent them. And of course, what we did in our tool is, since we're primarily a systems engineering tool, and we have 24 different types, at least, of the items that are in that top, that represent the columns in this table. So we could map ours easily to this set because this is a subset of what we provide. And so it's very easy then to represent these different viewpoints, these different models by the different diagram types that we use within our tool. And so that's all we had to do is identify those with labels. And that's what we did. We actually use a label to identify when it's an OB6A versus an OB6B or something like that. So anyway, so I think you'll find that it's fairly easy to understand once you kind of break that code. Again, models and views and viewpoints is something we put together to help people understand a little bit more the product and the terminology. So this is what we derive. So once you take the model, which is the type of diagram it is, and then you add the data to it, that gives you a view. And then a collection of views gives you a viewpoint. And then the collection of viewpoints give me an architecture. And that's how at least DoDAF discusses it and talks about it. So that at least helps us understand their terminology and why it's used this way. It is a little funny if you're not used to it. So really key is where is this all going? What's next? And in fact, a lot of people feel that the future of DoDAF is something different called the UAF, or Unified Architecture Framework. This was a chart provided to me a long time ago by a good friend of mine, Walt Ocon, and he was in fact in charge of a lot of the DoDAF at that time, and the DoDAF development. And this was his time frame cycle. And as you see, it's out of date. UAF was supposed to be here in 2016. Well, as usual, things got a little delayed. One of the things that happened in the interim here is DoDAF has been taken over by the Object Management Group. DoD has given them the mantle to take that forward. And they are also the ones who are pursuing this UAF, which is trying to unify all the different frameworks that are out there together into a common framework. If you actually get to look at UAF, it looks a little bit like the periodic table. It's a lot of different viewpoints and mappings and things like that. And we have done that mapping. And once we get a demand signal from customers, we will create a UAF dashboard as well. We haven't done it so far because none of our customers have said that's critical, and it has not been put into DoD policy. So we haven't seen how that's going to get used yet. So you're always hesitant as a tool vendor to provide something too early because it's usually wrong, and you have to make major changes, and then your customers have to import or export, or they have to do something extra special just to move data between the different versions, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. But UAF, if that is the future, and that's how the policy goes, and that's where people want to go, not a problem. We're going to be able to do that in Innoslate very quickly and easily, and we'll make that available when it's desired by the customer base. So that's kind of a quick overview of the history and what's going on with DoDAF. So here's our particular implementation of it. So what happened was we've had actually a DoDAF dashboard since version 2 of the tool, because as I've used DoDAF most of my career now, certainly since it was started in the mid-90s, it's been, and that's now over 20 years, almost 20 years, yeah, over 20 years, and so my math is not doing well for me today. But anyway, so you can see that this is something we've been worried about, wanting to implement properly for a long time. So we actually, again, map those models to the various diagram types, or document in the case of AV1. We actually give you the ability to create your AV1 directly in the tool. And then again, we use our labels to distinguish between the types. So for example, the OB5B uses an IDEF0 diagram and labels for the OB5B and DoDAF products. So I know, my dashboard knows to go look and see when you're trying to visualize an object and you want to see it as an OB5B, it's an IDEF0. And that's the definitions that we have found historically were correct for those different viewpoints. If you're using sysml, which came in much later really than the general products we had from DoDAF over the years, as you saw that timeline, then you can substitute those, and we can show you how to do that. It won't be automatic in your dashboard, sorry, but we can at least show you how to make that representation quickly. So converting from 3.9 to 4.1, I know that's a big question a lot of people have right now. It's actually very easy. All you have to do is export the 3.9 files, and most of the time, I believe, it'll be on systems that have a .ino option as an export option for the tool. The reason you want to use that one is that includes any pictures you've uploaded or files or anything like that, and captures it all as a zip file. If you're using the cloud version, we didn't allow .ino on the original cloud, which was the Google Cloud, so you'd have to export it as XML, and then you're going to use that as your import file. So as you come down then, so open a new project in 4.1, and if you're on the cloud, you actually can do this right together, and it's very easy. And then select the DoDAF dashboard from the menu, okay? So you've got a new project in 4.1, you go over into the menu on the left-hand side, pull down, and you select DoDAF dashboard. If you want to pin that, because you're going to want to use that thing, so you pin that up on your menu bar. And so then once you do that, it will automatically ask you a question about, can I load a bunch of labels? Those labels are the labels we use to distinguish the DoDAF products for the dashboard. So the answer to that is yes. So please hit yes to that. And then go ahead and import your 3.9.ino or .xml file using the import analyzer into a new project. That's very easy. And I'll go through to show you again very briefly how to do that when we get into the actual tool part of this webinar. So accessing viewpoints. So one of the things that we do is we present them in what is now become one of our key kinds of viewpoints that we've created, which is a combination of our documents and our diagrams viewpoints. So it looks like these little tiles. You see a picture of whatever it is that you were looking at, and it has the most recent ones showing up here at the top of this dashboard. So when you open up the dashboard, if you've imported a database, you may have to actually render these first to see them all, but basically it should start showing up very quickly as you use and create the products. If you're starting from scratch, you just start with that new DoDAF product button at the top right, and then you can select the product type you want, and it'll put you in the correct diagram type that we use for that purpose. Actually, I have a blank slide there. Anyway, so creating new products from the dashboard, as I said, select that new button, scroll down to what you're looking for, or start typing. If you do like AV, and it'll do all the AVs, or OV, type that real quickly, and it'll start giving you all the OVs. And then you can just select for it, and then it'll prompt you for a few pieces of information depending on what the diagram is. Usually, at least, it's asking you for the root element, so entity class. So that's the top of your entity, and that's a kind of container for whatever the information is that you're going to be capturing. So you think about what that might be. If you have existing ones, there's a DoDAF user's guide that tells you how to deal with existing ones. Right now, we don't have the ability to do existing ones from here. So that's existing roots. Again, it's a fairly easy thing to do, to apply to labels and open up the different viewpoints, but that's in documentation. So the second part of the DoDAF dashboard, though, is you scroll down and you will see something else. It says, initially it'll say all existing DoDAF products, okay? You see at the top there, and then of this frame, and then there's another little pull down that says showing all DoDAF products. Underneath that, you click that, you can actually sort it and find different sets of products. And I'll show you that in a second. So here's an example. So I click that showing all products, and I collect and I select, okay, I want just all the CV only. So when I do that, it'll then filter it and give me just the CVs as I have created. And so you can see how that works. And that's a nice way to lay it out and see the whole set of just whatever the viewpoint you're looking at are. And again, it's set up for all those. Or if you have a lot of let's say a lot of OB5s, that's not unusual. You click OB5 only, B onlys, and then get all the ones you need of that. So that's a nice way to again filter and work with the information as you need to. Another thing that's kind of neat in this new view is the generating reports from the view. So again, going back up, you see at the top right, and you come down a line, it says find a DoDAF product with a little search, and that's your finder. So again, you can type and find things specifically that way. So let's say you have a really large number of OB5Bs, you can actually find a specific one you're looking for. But the little button right next to it is the download. It looks like a download button. It is. That's the reports button. So click on that, and then you get the ability to download it as a Word document or PowerPoint. And what it will download is the diagram image plus any of the metadata that you want, like name, number, description, you want to include in the report. You can also give it a file name. You can provide your own file name with it for there, and then hit download it, and it'll create this document for you. So it's a very quick way to get kick-started into your PowerPoint or your format if you're doing presentations or DocX. We keep hoping someday we'll be doing model-based reviews. You'll never have to do this anymore, but that'll be a while. Not holding my breath. Neither should you. Okay, so the next thing was the visualization specific models. So here we have a new timeline diagram. This is very different than the timeline diagram we had previously. We have sort of two versions of it. One is for things where you are using actions as things. So capabilities are a type of action. So we can show, here we're showing in the top bar the CV3 where we're looking at the timeline view of the different aspects of that project. So we're seeing those different capabilities and when they're expected. And you can create dependency lines. You can add the milestones at the top. Those are actually time elements, entity class elements that are showing up there. So again, this is a nice way to visualize your schedule easily and cleanly. This is decomposable to 3 levels, so it looks nice. You can then, if you have a deeper one than that, then click on that one and select its timeline diagram, and it'll go down another 3 levels for you. So again, and you can sort that in a little wrench at the top right under the S. There's a little wrench in there. It has settings for how many levels and that kind of thing. You can set it for that. Also, you set the time scale, and it'll only show you the things that are within that time scale. So that's another factor. That's both a plus and a minus, right? Because if it's outside of it, you say, well, what if I started in 2020 with this chart, the approved ICD wouldn't show up. That first capability wouldn't show up, and I'd go, what happened to that? Well, change your time scale, you'll see it. It'll pop right back up. So it is still in the database. It's just you're not visualizing it in that time center you want. Or of course, that's important because obviously you want to focus in on the times you care about, not on the things you don't care about. The one below it is more common actually in the DoDAF, is more things that are already more milestones. And so this gives you a time evolution chart of the different milestones in this case that would be part of that system evolution. So I hope that helps you. These are really nice new charts. They're very easy to use. They look very nice. They're very presentable to a broad audience, and that was the intent of these for that. But underneath the one above, by the way, is an action diagram. You can create the action diagram also by just opening the action diagram for this, and it'll pop it up, and you can do the rest of the things we've been doing in terms of doing model-based project management. So another new product that we're applying now. This is a thing that came in or I want to say maybe in even 3.9, but in 4.0, we added these more and created a much better chart to be able to map things together. So what this does is you're showing one dimension against the other dimension. Okay, so in the case, the one you can see the full, I'll talk to that one. So you see here we have our SV5B. Those are our system functions, basically. And at the top, the columns are operational activities primarily. It looks like with the mixture of things. So it depends on how it's been set up. And so it's looking for, this is a specific query that's been set up for you automatically. If you want to do more with this, or you want to change this kind of thing, you can get into the actual original timeline diagram. I'm sorry, it's called Traceability Matrix for this, and work with it there. What's nice about this chart, again, when you put an X in it, it automatically is setting the relationship between these things. So, for example, I don't know if you can see it or not, but the S.1.2 track launcher has an X connecting to the OB.2.1 sensors, which makes sense, actually. And so that has that information. And if I hover over that specific item, it would show up its descriptive information, its name, number, and description here on the left. That way I can see, as I'm hovering over any cell, what probably should get connected. If you need to see more detail about each one of them, all the attributes and all the other things, if you click on either the row or the column headers, it will actually click on that element entity, and you can go in and make those changes to those values as well right there. So that's very valuable. Another thing that's valuable in this view is in the wrench, you have the Traceability Assistant, which is a natural language processing algorithm that reads those description fields and will give you advice on how they should be connected. So that's actually a very helpful tool in understanding what things should be related to one another. And also it's a good indicator of maybe things that maybe I should have done something with and made that correct. So anyway, so this is a good way to look at that information. It's simpler, it's easier to understand, and it's completely interactive. Then we have the special matrices. So the OB3 and SV6 are very special. This is basically a hacked version of our database view. Our database view normally will take and reference, when you make a relationship between things, it is assuming that you're relating it to the one just previous to it. Whereas this matrix, the first column is the conduit, the second column is the input-output. Then most of the other columns are related to the input-output. Okay, so instead of being like the next one is the generated by is the action that generated that input-output, well, okay, so I can relate that one to it, and then the next one's the asset, I can relate that to it. But the next column is received by. So it has to reference all the way back to this first data element and the input-output. And so that's why it's a little different, and we had to do something very special for that. So this is a very special view. If you need other things than this, contact us. We can talk to you about other ways to give you specifically what you need. But the nice thing about this is it's fully interactive again. I can sort it, I can filter it, I can go in and make changes to things right here. So it's a nice view of the whole thing. You will have to scroll a bit because, as you can see, it gets pretty big. Okay, so that's a very quick thumbnail of all the new features and things that have happened in DoDAF. And I do want to remind you, for questions, make sure you're asking questions as you go here. We do have the questions set. And we already have one question which says, are the slides going to be made available? And of course, yes. I totally understand that question. Okay, so let's get out of that and let's go see the tool. Make sure you're seeing it. Yeah, okay, good. So the new version of the DoDAF is, again, I'm sorry, Innoslate is very, very different than probably what you're used to in 3.9. First of all, you're greeted by a new dashboard. This dashboard has tremendous features to help you interact with your management, manage the project more effectively, and be able to communicate status of the project more effectively. So for example, here we've got a wiki panel which you can click into and edit and embed diagrams if you like, because that's one of the options here is a diagram. So for example, here I've embedded my OB1 diagram for it right here. And so this is putting a note out to everybody, check out the latest OB1 and see if you like it. And so if you want to go to that, you would right click, open the link in a new tab, and then it would be accessible to you right there if you signed in. There we go. Yeah. So that gives you that information. So if we do a timeout now, by the way, just so you know, after about a half hour, it times out. So of interactivity. So that's intentional, and so that shouldn't be too big a problem. But in general, you will find yourself signing in a little bit more often than you used to. Okay, here's another panel which is showing different actions per DM2 category, activity, capability, function. That's controlled by this little pencil. It says edit, and I can say the kinds of things I'm looking for. So I'm looking for labels, and I want to get these different specific types of labels. Again, I can just select different options here, classes, enumerations, other things I want to look for and do specific things with. I can also have a table. This is a kind of a neat table. This is a risk table showing me my open risks, and then I've specified those, and this is the query for it. Now this is tying that particular attribute ID. The way to get to these queries is to create them first in database view, and once you're happy with the kind of thing you're looking for, then use it in here is the easiest way to do that. So a quick way to do that. And another thing is the activity feed is still here. I believe you're used to seeing that, but now we've added in the ability to see what's changed automatically too. So you can see that history right here on this activity feed dashboard. So a little more information. And please don't forget about the feedback panel. If you're using the cloud version, send us feedback here. We do use your feedback. We really like to have the feedback. It helps us create a much better tool. Also, if you're on a system behind your own firewall, send it to support@innoslate.com. Okay, so we are always looking for your feedback. Most of these changes and features you see in the new version came from user requests. They were heavily driven by the users. So to let you know that you are helping design this tool all the time. And no, I'm not going to pay you. So anyway, so the next thing you might want to be doing is importing. I mentioned the import problem. So to import, it's our .ino or XML. It's just once you've exported it from the earlier version, just come and drag that file in here, and you're good to go. It'll automatically make the upgrade for you. So, but do remember, open that DoDAF dashboard first. Make sure the labels are the most recent labels, because it will look at your labels, and we have made a few changes. Not many, but a few. So again, those specific ones are in our DoDAF Users Guide. And I'll show you how to get to that in a second, too. So here in the DoDAF dashboard, let's get to the meat of this. So here's your DoDAF dashboard. You can see it more live here. So these are the most recent ones I've opened and touched, and that's how this is ordered. That's the important part. And we do that so that you have a very quick way to go back and forth between things you're touching a lot right now, so you can see the different types of things. Again, to create a new DoDAF product, I would just come over here, select what product I want, and then I have them all in this one particularly, so I'm not going to add one, but you can see the different kinds of things. Let's say a standards profile, I'd hit next. It would specify, and in this case, there's nothing left to do. It's all good. So, in fact, I already had one set up for this, so I was just really going back to that same one. So some of these things, they are concurrent. And then you notice my standards view 1 shows up here on the most recently modified because that's the one I just did. So if I want to keep changing it, I can change it there. Let's go on, scroll down. Again, you can load more, by the way, lets you put more onto that particular slot. But usually you're going to find yourself probably scrolling down here and saying, well, I really just care about my CVs today. So let's go grab those CVs and take a look at what I've got. So here's my CVs set, and it's ordering it, especially sorted by number, but it's not. And so here are the different aspects of what's out there, and you can go in and edit those, click on it. Here's the changes for it. Again, if I look at the underneath the hood, let's look at the entity view. Here's what it is. It says CV1 DoDAF product. So this particular one, this TSD defeat capability, is the basis for that CV1 DoDAF product. So I can again go back, and that will actually put it back there. So notice what I'm looking at here. I am looking at one of my asset diagrams. And you can see that if you look over here on the left in the sidebar, right under the big asset thing, there's a little tag. It says asset diagram. So you know exactly what type of diagram you're on as well as it's a CV1. And I'm using the numbering scheme to help remind me that this is my CV1 as well. So I have both the label and the number to help me do that. If I have existing entities, I can relate them here. And if I have existing entities in other projects, here's this little button right by the side is the project I want to import from. So I can bring in things from totally different projects that I'm looking for as well. So that's another thing that's kind of nice and useful. Again, completely live information here. Conduits are the lines between them. Easy to use, easy to change. I think you'll like using this particular version of it. Okay, so I go back to diagrams, and DoDAF. And so I look at some of these others. So let's look at that timeline diagram. I'm very excited about the timeline, to be honest. So this is one here where, again, I've got different milestones. I can change the color of those milestones. So this one I changed it from blue to open so that you can see that it's complete. Again, depending on what symbology you want to use, you can do that. You can change these things if you say that, oh, I want to say that that's really a 20% complete, or 20% complete. You notice it'll create a little bit of a bar here to indicate that it's that amount complete. You can create dependencies between the items by selecting the green circle and then connecting them together, and that gives me a dependency line. That doesn't just give me a dependency line, it actually changed the relationship here and gives me a depended by relationship. If I go to all, depends on. And you see the relationship here. So CT.1.3, now this action depends on that. So that's what it's doing for you. If I say that's wrong, I can click it off here, and it will update that as I save it. So let me go back to that. There we go. Let's save it. So these are things that are here available to you for interactivity purposes, and I think you'll find it's a lot easier to use because of that. Let's take a look at some of those other new document types while we're here. So let's go look at the OBs for a second. So one of the new types we have. Oh, so we actually made a distinction between the OV1, OV2, SV1, SV2. In the OV1 and the SV1, we use the asset diagram. In the OV2 and SV2, and same thing with service view, we can also use an asset diagram, or in the systems version of that, we actually use the physical I/O diagram. So again, depending on what you're doing and how you're working, you have different diagram types that you can work with. Let's see. Anything that's new here? I'm trying to see. Oh, OB3. There we go. So here's an example of the OB3, a little bit more complete. And so in here, it works off the OB1. So in fact, what it's doing is it is looking at that OB1 diagram, and it'll take this little snapshot of it in here as well to use as the icon of it. And you can see in here, these are the different interfaces or conduits between them. So you can click on that particular conduit, see its relationships that are associated with it as well, other metadata. If you need to see its attributes, you could add those to the table as well, but that's really done in database view. This is locked right now to this specific format because this is different in database view, so just be aware of that. So we're just trying to put in the things that were specific to the different things that we're defining the OB3. So when I scroll over and I get to the input-output elements, and again, I can edit those and change them as I need to here. And then I can see it's what generated them. So that those are all data from other views that's coming into play here. The asset name is then what that operational activity is associated with. So this is the operational node that would be tied to it. So that's your asset number. And then your received by is the same thing. So this is the generate and receives. Same thing with the action and the asset. So that gives you a very quick view of that particular product. If you feel like you need more, or you need something different, contact us and we can talk about how to help you do that. Let's go back. I'm trying to think, what else do we have? Oh, I know, matrices. I forgot to show you the matrices. So let's jump to one of these others, and this was an example of specifically a services view 5. So here I'm looking at the services at the top, particularly, although it looks like somehow the couple of my system views may have gotten tagged as services as well, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, so as I'm hovering over a cell, I'm hovering over that first cell. I see detect launch and global information grid. So global information grid has quite a bit of description under it, but this detect launch says more data. So you need to have more data to describe what that is. So as you can see, as you're working through that, it'll highlight the different aspects of it. And you see most of these don't have any kind of descriptions associated with them. So again, that's really poor practice, but it is typical practice too. So, and as you see, as I click on a specific one, I get its specific data elements, its metadata, attributes, and relationships. And again, I can change those here, most of them. We lock in this view the decompose by decomposes because we're using that relationship in this view. So that's why you don't see that here. So in fact, yeah, for some reason that got tied in as a service as well. So it's not just a system, it's a service. Interesting, we did that, this particular model. So that again gives you some aspects of it that maybe you hadn't seen before. I think, was there anything else I think we missed here? I think that's the primary things. And so I think hopefully you're going to find this is a lot more fun to use. We did add, one of the other things we did, just make sure I show you this one too, the AV products. Again, we have the AV1, which was in our documents view. Again, nice, clean, easy to use view with it as well. And then the AV2, which is we went ahead and succumbed and said this is not just the export of the physical exchange specification file, but we give you now it as an acronym list or definitions glossary kind of viewpoint. Again, this is in our database view being used for this, and set up for that. And this is our full database view, so you can do anything else you want. So you come over that wrench and set up your settings. You can add related columns. You can add metadata you're looking for. Do whatever you need to do with it. So again, you can make that. And anytime, by the way, again, in the new version of the tool, you're looking at what kind of reports are available. There's a little reports button in the view you're in. Click on it, and it'll give you a list of the reports that you have available to you. Okay, so just, don't feel like you're constrained to any particular thing. And I do highly recommend once you get into using the DoDAF and start realizing that there's more to life than DoDAF, then you can go explore other views and diagrams and things we have, including our risk chart, which is relatively new and been updated significantly. So here are risks. So you have those kinds of things with it. The new documents view lets you author all kinds of different document types and create your own document type. So you can have different categories of documents yourself. You can upload your own templates. There's just a lot you can do with this view now in the database. And the database view is completely changed, where you can save your queries. You can set up specific queries, very complex ones, and then if you want to just say, well, show me the cost matrix, and I create that as one of the options I have. So characteristics matrix. So these are all queries that have been set up automatically for me. There's also a new thing called top of hierarchy, which lets you see things hierarchically as well. So again, very, very useful views, new features in this version of the tool. So as you're coming into the new version, I think you'll find there's a lot of new things that are going to help you do stuff, not the least of which is things like workflow. So as you come along, you can add workflow to your elements now for requirements tracking and management. You can do it for action tracking, issue tracking. This is an example where we've actually put it on the artifact themselves, so we can actually have a set of statuses of the actual artifacts and working through those. So again, so many new features in the tool. I think you'll be pretty excited once you get into it. So I think I've left us a decent amount of time for questions. So let's see what we've got.
Alrighty. First question, how could you use this for a model-based review?
Okay, so that's a great question. And that comes from Jerry Sellers, who's done that himself, so he knows the answer, but I'm gonna, it's a great question. So when you're in the view, one of the best things, we have actually a little write-up on how to conduct model-based reviews. But what you do is you set up as your requirements document the criteria for the review. So almost every review has specific checklists of things you need to be doing. And so you upload those as a requirements document. And then from that, you can link it to, using hyperlinks or other ways, to the specific pictures and things like that, or even embed the pictures and things you want them to see and write-ups you want to see right within this view. So this gives you a great way of doing that, and then they can click on it, and on the sidebar, they can add comments. Okay, so you can add the comments, so you say, needs fixing. Something as useful as that. And those comments so you can go back and forth with people, and they say, well, okay, what do you mean by needs fixing? And so what are the specific things you're looking for? And so you go back and forth. As the owner of it, you can edit it or delete it, by the way, and also you can have it resolved. So if I can show the resolved and not resolved. So that's a very simple way. And then you create a comments report. That's available to you as well, so that gives you a nice form for that. So let me just go back to the whole thing. And that's one of the reports here, I believe in this version, is the comment report. And that way you can get that and track it and work with it that way too. So again, very, very useful for that purpose. As I said, Dr. Sellers used this on all the NASA milestone reviews and earlier version. And the newer version actually even makes that even easier with the new documents view, particularly. I think that kind of hits that.
All right, so it looks like we have a second question. I'm currently working on a project that is using Innoslate 3.9 to develop DoDAF models. Are there any guides or literature that details the entity types and labels that are required in order for the viewpoint to be generated?
Oh, yes. So again, I think I showed that a little earlier. So whenever you're looking at any specific item, click on it, see its labels, and if it has DoDAF product and CV2, then that's what's going to be used to generate the CV3 in this case. It's going to be used to generate that CV3. And so you can add those yourself if you need to. If you say, oh, I've already created one, and I want it now to also be the parent for the CV1 or something else, then that's appropriate, then you can certainly tag it with that, and it will show up that way automatically for you in the DoDAF dashboard. I will tell you, you must make sure you visualize the item first in whatever that view is you're looking for. So make sure you open it as a particular diagram type. So if I want to see it as an activity diagram, I would open it that way. That will not necessarily show up that way now as a diagram in the DoDAF view. Okay, so you notice that I didn't make any changes to it. It didn't show up there. It won't show up in diagrams view either because I didn't change anything. So again, you have to make sure you changed it and saved it when you do that as well.
Next question. Will the DoDAF dashboard look the same if I am using SysML?
Right now, yes, because we use the classic definitions that are in the DoDAF for the types of diagram types there are. So for example, the OB3 is an IDEF0. I know that's not probably the one you're using if you're doing SysML, but all you have to do to go from one to the other is select. And I can go to diagrams view and I'll show you what I mean. So let's say I'm in the activity diagram. I wanted to see it as IDEF0. Here's the IDEF0 version of it. So if I have that diagram, all I have to do to get back to the activity diagram is select activity diagram. I could have gone either way with that. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you are. If that's what you're doing, you can pop to that. Right now, we don't shall we say, favor SysML. So we haven't actually made a SysML version where you could do that. But if that's something that's desirable, again, put that in the feedback form, and we're happy to address that in the future version, future release.
All right, next question. Could you please talk about the method to change from DoDAF categories and SysML categories for document creation?
So really, the document creation side of this, we use the documents view for that purpose, so you can actually see the different types of documents and things, and then we embed them in directly. So we have the ability to actually take and put a specific type of diagram in here. So if you have a particular one, like a risk diagram or something like that, we just insert it, and that's how it's that simple. So this lets you interact with them and create the documentation the way you would naturally, but I have the benefits of now it's all addressable. I can change it. If I update the diagram, it automatically updates it in the tool as well, things like that. Actually, I do want to delete that one.
Next question. You said you'd address UAF. Did I miss it, or is it coming at the end?
So I did mention it when I talked to that one slide that had UAF on it. We have done the mapping to it, I think I said at that time. We have not created a UAF dashboard yet. We're waiting for some kind of policy indicator to indicate that DoD really is going to adopt UAF. That's unclear to us at this point in time. We've not seen any particular memos or anything on that. If somebody has one, please send it to us. But we'd like to also make sure it's well enough defined that we're implementing a stable version of it, not just whatever just popped out as version 1.0. So again, it's something we are thinking about. As far as actually doing the mappings, though, I've got a table for that purpose. So if anybody needs that, or we can provide that for you, and you can see how you would relate them, and you can do that manually yourself. You just wouldn't have a fancy dashboard to do it on.
Next question. Do you have a feel for how big of a transition it would be from DoDAF to UAF?
It turns out the number of diagram types didn't increase significantly. So in reality, it's not very different. What happened was that they created new kinds of viewpoints. And so things like you have a security viewpoint now, essentially. Things like that, which, by the way, I absolutely do not like. Because security is not an extra thing or not a separate thing. It's embedded in your design. So it shouldn't be a separate thing. So that's one of the reasons, particularly, I'm struggling a little bit with implementing UAF because I'm afraid we're actually making things harder for people and not easier. So that's why I want to see a real policy level adoption of it before I go in and busy up my tool even more.
Next question. If I already have documents created on Magic Draw, could I easily incorporate them into new documents on Innoslate? Is it easy to switch between the two?
So the answer to the last one is no, and there's a good reason for it. So first of all, let me show you, you can import output from Magic Draw as an XMI into Innoslate. However, unfortunately, the way that was developed and the way people use Magic Draw is they've created their own ontology. Now, by that I mean that you have your own way things are referenced and looked at, and in fact, another problem is they also mix and match the drawing rules between different types of drawings on the same diagram. We've seen this many, many times now. And so that's a real problem for us because we generate all our diagrams from the data in the database. So if you make a change anywhere in the database of a data element that's associated with that item, it will show up automatically. You'll get all kinds of things you maybe didn't expect because you've made a connection someplace you should have, which is fine, but that information needs to be also on that diagram. And so that's the big problem we have going back and forth between that and more drawing-based tools. We are a completely data-driven tool. And so that's what causes some of that difficulty. The other thing we've also run into is that a lot of times we find the diagrams themselves are not executable. Now, I know, what do I mean by that? So, for example, we have the ability to take this diagram and execute it in a discrete event simulation or as a Monte Carlo simulation, okay? Now, I know that with like Magic Draw, you can use the Camino to do a walkthrough, but this actually will build the Gantt chart. You can capture costs, you can do resource tracking. It has physical constraints put on the diagram as well. So many things that just don't even exist in Magic Draw are in Innoslate. And so that's the problem we have. And to go back and forth would be almost impossible. Because once you'd be losing information when you went from Innoslate to Magic Draw, and vice versa, really. Because really, again, since they can mix and match things in ways we can't, and aren't really appropriate, to be honest, because then you're sort of defeating the purpose of having a standard type of diagram. If you're able to draw anything, you're really just using Visio. So just use Visio; it's a lot cheaper, and no plugins.
Another question. What's next for the DoDAF dashboard?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have anything on my radar at the moment. We have some tweaking things like the ability to not just have new, but be able to take existing routes and working from those as well to generate a sister product. For example, if I've already started a CV1 or a CV2, they should be connected to each other. I should be able to start from that same route and get the sister diagram. Right now, the way we have to do that is we have to actually go in and adjust the labels. And I don't particularly think that's sufficient. So that's one thing I know that's a problem. Beyond that, I don't know. It really depends upon what users ask for. We're always open to that. So whatever anybody thinks we need, please let us know. I can think, for example, and a good one I think from the previous comment was maybe we want to have an option of substituting the SysML views of the different diagrams if that's what you prefer to do. We're just not a big proponent of SysML because we think it's an incomplete standard. It's fine for what it is, but it's too narrow for what we need as system engineers. So that's our opinion. And but again, it's your product. You tell us what you need, and we'll help. We'll make it happen.
So, looks like that's all the questions we've received.
And we're out of time.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone who asked a question. That's awesome. Great time.
And everybody who came and viewed.
Yeah, we'd like to thank everyone actually for joining us for today's webinar. I do want to remind everyone we did record it, and we will make it available on the Spec Innovations YouTube channel. I'll be doing that tomorrow morning. For more resources, we do encourage everyone to visit our website, of course. And we do want to invite everyone back for our next webinar. It is titled How to Perform Model-Based Reviews. So the question earlier was very appropriate for that. And it will be next month on Thursday, February 21st at 2 p.m. We'll be sending out emails. We'll be right here again doing it on our GoToWebinar. So do stay connected with us. You can, of course, stay connected with us. You can always do that through social media, the Innoslate user group, or on Twitter using the handle @Innoslate. And again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. We'll see you next month.